What's going on, guys? My name is Tim Ruswick, and I just got done watching a GDC talk from the developers of Inside, and they also did Limbo, about interrupting experiences. They were talking specifically about audio. When you would restart from dying, music cues would stop and everything would have to go through again. You would actually hear the same music again. And this brought up some thoughts that I was having about photophobia, because the immersion of a game, when you're really into a game and something happens that breaks that immersion, is really important. And I couldn't figure out in my game why. It was feeling weird. It didn't quite feel right. And I meant with cutscenes, I meant with dying specifically, or with menu options, or whatever it is. And I realized after watching this talk, even though they were talking specifically about audio in the talk, this really applies to game design in general. It's something that absolutely has come up multiple times, even though I didn't really recognize specifically what it was. Now that this has kind of come to light, I've kind of realized, like, oh, this is what was happening. This is why that didn't feel right. So I want to kind of just talk a little bit about why experiences are important and what interrupting does when a player is in an experience. So games are unlike any medium on the planet. You've got the visual effects of a movie, and a little bit of the immersion there. You got the, artistic side and the mood and all that of an album. You have all of this design and interaction experience, right? But on top of that, you actually put yourself in the shoes of the main character, and you experience things. You don't just watch things like in a movie. You don't just listen to things like on an album. You actually experience the game. So that experience, that immersion into the game world, is very important, because that's what keeps your player playing. There are games that don't require that level of immersion. They're usually mobile games or casual games, or like super games that just they're mindless, and you can just kind of play them while listening to something else. And we all love our casual mindless games, right? I play games like that a lot, listening to podcasts or stuff like that. But the immersion, I think, is really important, especially for emotional games. And I happen to be making a game where I think the immersion is really important, because my game is about emotion. It's about the 5 stages of grief. It's about really feeling these emotions. I want the player to feel these things in themselves, as they're playing through the game. So for me, it's really important that they have immersion. It's really important that they experience the things through my game, not necessarily the way that I design it, but in a way, some way possible, right? And there are things that can break the immersion. Like there's an old tweet from Notch where he was like, sometimes I'm playing a game and the screen goes black and I see my reflection and I think about what I'm doing with my life. And then he tweets again, and then the next level starts. Woohoo! I always thought that was hilarious. But what he's talking about is that immersion break. I think we've all kind of experienced that before, right? Like, we're so into this game, we're playing it, we're like super soldier, we're a whatever, playing through the level, and then like that loading screen pops up. And you're like, oh, check my phone. What time is it? Am I hungry? Am I thirsty? Is anybody home? What's like, you go back into the world. You leave the game world and you go back into the real world. And those kind of things suck, man. Like in a really immersive game, those breaks just they destroy it. They pull you out of it. And I think that's, when you compare a bad game to a bad movie, a lot of times bad movies are better at holding your attention than bad games are, because bad games that constantly break that immersion loop are just, you can't get into them. There's no point. Whereas a bad movie, at least you can keep making fun of the characters and keep watching, right? So the things that break the immersion are all over the place, and you really have to watch for them. And it's kind of hard to pay attention to them while you're designing and iterating and changing stuff. But it's easier to see this when you watch someone play your game, or you have a video of someone playing your game over and over, especially if they die pretty often. So Some of the things that just, break immersion for me, cutscenes. Cutscenes break immersion a lot. If I'm really, really, really into the story, they can be interesting. But a lot of times when you're like in the action, shooting people, doing whatever, and then all of a sudden, boom, cutscene, you're no longer interacting with the screen. It can kind of be like, whoa, what just happened? I've noticed this too when I'm playing co-op games, because I play games with my brother a lot. And we'll be talking, we're going back and forth, having fun, laughing, and then the cutscene starts. And like, we either have to go quiet and listen to the cutscene, or we have to talk over it sometimes. Or we skip it. So if you don't have skippable cutscenes, make sure that's something you add in. But there are a lot of games that maybe don't have to use cutscenes, right? That can tell stories in interesting ways. And anybody that's played the Phylophobia demo, if you're a beta dude, you've noticed I've been trying to experiment with different ways to tell the story. Like, what if the bosses show up in the levels and taunt you? What if things happen? What if there are voices in the level when you interact with objects? Not so much, boom, you did this thing, then this cutscene pops up and pulls you out of the experience. So I've been really experimenting with that kind of stuff, because cutscenes, the more that I try, at least in my game, I'm not saying in general, but at least in my game, they just seem to break the immersion. That's something to pay attention to. Audio is another big thing, and this is the thing that inspired this whole video. If you have a soundtrack or a music or a sound effect or anything like that that plays over and over again, and let's say you have a really quick death loop, like they run and play the game and they die. Like, let's say you have a game like Super Meat Boy, right? You're gonna die a lot. And if the music has a really catchy tune for some reason, and you play it over and over again, and they keep dying and they keep hearing that same very iconic like tune, it's gonna drive them crazy, right? That's why games that have loops like that, not only do they usually have more ambient music, but in addition, a lot of them don't restart the music at all when you die. It's just you play through it, the music starts, you die, the music doesn't stop, and you start over and you keep playing. I actually do that in Phylophobia because the death cycle is so quick. And that has actually really helped the immersion, I think. A lot of people, when they die, it's not like this, boom, you're dead, like this big thing that like tells you you're dead. No, it just pops you back into the experience. The music didn't stop, nothing stopped. It's just, it keeps you going. And then sound effects similarly too. If there's a repetitive sound effect that's like loud, or it can just get annoying hearing it over and over again. Let's say there's a section of your game where something happens. You push a box or something, or you hit a pole or something, and you do it, and then you die, and you got to do it again. You got to do it, and that whole sound effect keeps playing again. Just keep that in mind. Context sensitive for level design. But also maybe, tone down the sound effect or change the level design or whatever you got to do to make sure you don't break that immersion. And the last thing too that I think kind of breaks immersion a little bit, for me anyway, is when I have to interact with objects, and like sometimes like dialogue trees in games, or things that stop the action. So similar to cutscenes, but they don't necessarily have to be dialogue. They can be, if I have to do a puzzle, right? Or I have to do one of those things. It's not necessarily that puzzles are bad or dialogue trees are bad or these menu systems are bad. None of that stuff is bad. I'm not saying it's bad, but I'm saying in a certain game types, it can really change the pace of the game, like real quick. And I've noticed this with Phylophobia too. The game is super quick. It's really fast. You go, you run, you jump, you die, you start over, you go, you run, you jump, and die. And I had some levels that were super exploratory where you didn't know where to go. That slowed down the pace ridiculously. And a lot of people, because they played through my fast-paced game, when they got to a slow-paced level, they didn't like it. And same thing with puzzles. Like if I had a puzzle that just stopped the player on the track and made them think, when before they were just running and jumping and actiony, and then now all of a sudden there's a wall where they got to think, that's a complete change in pace. Change of pace isn't always bad, but it is something to take into consideration when you're dealing with potential immersion breaking experiences, because the change of pace like that really makes you like wake up, like, what? I was just running 1,000 miles a minute, now I got to stop? or vice versa. You know, it's super slow and then all of a sudden it just takes off. So, you know, gradual inclines of that stuff work better. And you can look these up online, but especially for like difficulty, you can go up and then down and up and down and so on and so forth. So those are the couple things that I wanted to share about immersion breaking experience and how you can prevent experiences from breaking your immersion in your game. There's just some examples from my game and stuff that I've seen. I hope it was helpful. If it was, please leave me a like and a comment down below. Is there any questions you have on this? Is there any experiences that you've had that broke your immersion in a game? Let me know in the comments below. Once again, my name is Tim Roswick, and I'll see you again tomorrow.